The Korean Mafia boss's wife tried to get rid of the nanny. Only then did he reveal who he loved. Welcome back to Solely Soul Stories. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button, tap that like, and tell me in the comments, what state or country are you watching from today? Because this story is about to take you somewhere you never expected. Jae-won Park pushed open the door to the nursery, and what he saw in that split second would haunt him for the rest of his life. He wasn't supposed to catch her. Soo-min had been with their family for 8 months. She was the nanny, quiet and gentle, the only person their 2-year-old daughter, Yuna, would fall asleep for. Jae-won's wife, Hana, had hired her personally, insisting they needed someone with experience, someone trustworthy. She comes highly recommended, Hana had said with that perfect smile of hers. Trust me, she's exactly what we need. Jae-won had been in Busan for 3 days. Business, his associates called it. The kind of business that didn't get discussed over dinner. He ran one of the most powerful organizations in Seoul, a legacy passed down from his father and his father before him, built on loyalty, silence, and blood. But when it came to his daughter, Jae-won was just a father, nothing more, nothing less. He'd come home early that evening. His meeting had ended ahead of schedule, and something pulled him back. A feeling he couldn't name, a weight in his chest that whispered, "Go home now." He'd learned long ago to trust those instincts. In his line of work, ignoring them meant death. The house was quiet when he arrived. Too quiet. The staff had been dismissed for the evening. Hana's doing, he'd later learn. She'd sent everyone home early, claiming she wanted private family time. At the time, it seemed thoughtful. In hindsight, it was calculated. Jae-won loosened his tie as he walked through the marble foyer, his footsteps echoing off the walls. The chandelier above cast fractured light across the floor, and somewhere in the distance, he heard the soft hum of the heating system. He found Yuna asleep in her room, peaceful, undisturbed. Her small chest rose and fell with each breath. Her tiny fingers curled around her favorite stuffed rabbit. Jae-won stood in the doorway for a moment, just watching her. This was why he did everything. This small, perfect person, who had his mother's eyes and his stubborn chin. He pressed a kiss to her forehead and quietly closed the door. But as he walked toward the east wing, toward the guest quarters where Soo-min stayed, he heard it. A muffled cry, the sound of something crashing, glass shattering against hardwood. His stomach dropped. Jae-won's hand hit the door, pushing it open, and time fractured. Hana stood in the center of the room, her designer heels planted on the polished floor, her face twisted into something he'd never seen before. In her hand, she gripped a shard of broken glass from the antique vase that lay shattered at her feet, a vase that had been in his family for 3 generations. And on the floor, backed against the wall, was Soo-min, blood running down her arm, her eyes wide with terror, her breath coming in sharp, panicked gasps. "What are you doing?" His voice ripped through the room like a gunshot. Hana's head snapped toward him. The glass fell from her hand, clattering against the floor with a sound that seemed to echo forever. For one impossible second, Jae-won couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't reconcile the woman he'd married with the woman standing over Soo-min's bleeding body. This was Hana, the woman who hosted charity galas and smiled for cameras, the woman who wore designer gowns and spoke 4 languages, the woman who kissed him goodbye every morning like she meant it, who laughed at his jokes, who was supposed to be the mother of his child. But the woman staring back at him now, eyes wild, chest heaving, lips pulled back in something between a snarl and a smile, wasn't the woman he thought he knew at all. And in that moment, Jae-won realized something that would change everything. He had no idea who he'd been sleeping beside all these years. But before we continue, hit that like button, subscribe, and tell me where in the world you're watching from, because sometimes fate lets us see the truth just in time, before it's too late. Jae-won's hands were still shaking when he moved forward. He didn't think, didn't process, didn't calculate the way he usually did. His body just reacted, crossing the room in 2 strides, placing himself between Hana and Soo-min, like a wall she'd have to go through to finish what she'd started. Soo-min's breaths came in ragged gasps, her hand pressed against the wound on her arm, blood seeping through her fingers, dripping onto the floor in a steady rhythm. Her face was pale, her eyes glassy with shock and pain. "Look at me," Jae-won said, his voice low and steady despite the chaos screaming inside his head. "Soo-min, look at me. Are you okay? Can you stand?" Soo-min nodded weakly, her eyes never leaving Hana, as if she expected another attack at any moment, as if she'd learned not to turn her back on this woman. I think so," she whispered. Behind him, Hana stood frozen against the wall, her chest heaving, her hands still shaped like they were holding something she'd dropped. She stared at them, at Jae-won shielding the nanny, at the blood pooling on the floor, at the shattered remains of her plan lying in pieces around her, and for a moment, she looked almost surprised, like she hadn't expected him to walk through that door, like she'd thought she had more time. J1, Hana's voice was sharp, defensive, already constructing the lie she'd tell. This isn't what it looks like. He didn't respond, didn't even acknowledge that she'd spoken. Instead, he pulled out his phone and dialed his most trusted lieutenant, a man named Kang, who had been with his family since before Jaewon was born. Get Dr. Yoon to the house. Now, East Wing guest quarters, and bring security. Full detail. He hung up before Hana could say another word. You're calling them? Hana's voice pitched higher, frantic now, the mask slipping further with each passing second. Over her? She's just a servant, Jaewon. She's nobody. A peasant from Jeolla province who got lucky enough to work in this house. You're really going to believe her over your own wife? Jaewon turned slowly, and for the first time since the glass had fallen, he looked at Hana, really looked at her. She was pale, trembling. Her perfect makeup was smudged, mascara running slightly at the corners of her eyes. Her silk blouse, the one that cost more than most people made in a month, was wrinkled, splattered with drops of blood that weren't hers. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold. They weren't filled with remorse. They weren't filled with horror at what she'd done. They were filled with fear. Not fear for Sumin, fear for herself, fear of what this meant, what he would do, what she stood to lose. She was going to ruin everything, Jaewon said, his voice low and controlled, each word landing like a stone. That's what you said, isn't it? I heard you through the door before I opened it. You're going to ruin everything and I won't let you. Hana's mouth opened. No, that's not. Jaewon, you don't understand. You're taking her side without even hearing my. Then help me understand. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Explain to me how my wife ended up holding a piece of broken glass over my daughter's nanny. Explain to me why Sumin is bleeding on the floor. Explain to me what everything she was supposedly going to ruin. The room went silent. Even the air seemed to stop moving, waiting for whatever came next. Hana's eyes darted to Sumin, then back to Jaewon, then to the door where she knew his men would soon appear. Her lips trembled, and for a moment, just a moment, he saw something genuine flash across her face. Desperation. Raw, naked desperation. She's been trying to take you from me, Hana whispered, her voice cracking. Ever since she came into this house, the way she looks at you when you come home, the way she smiles when you pick up Yuna, the way our daughter runs to her instead of me. I'm your wife, Jaewon. I'm supposed to be the one who matters. I'm supposed to be the center of this family. But she's been stealing everything from me, piece by piece. And you don't even see it. Jaewon stared at her. So you tried to kill her. I wasn't going to kill her. Hana's voice rose, defensive. I just wanted to scare her. Make her understand that she needed to leave. Make her see that she doesn't belong here. That she never belonged here. I wasn't going to. With a piece of glass to her arm, with enough force to draw blood. Hana's face crumpled. She pressed her back harder against the wall, her hands coming up like she wanted to reach for him, to touch him, to somehow bridge the chasm that had opened between them. But she didn't dare. Jaewon, please, just listen to me. We can fix this. Just you and me. The way it's always been. We can send her away tonight. Give her money, whatever she wants. And no one ever has to know. We can fix this, please. He didn't answer. Two of his men appeared in the doorway, their dark suits crisp, their expressions carefully neutral. They'd seen things in their years of service. Violence, betrayal, death, but even they seemed uncertain about what they'd walked into. One of them, Kang, stepped forward, his hand resting casually on his belt where Jaewon knew he kept a knife. Sir? Jaewon's voice was ice, colder than he'd ever heard it, even in the worst moments of his work. Take her to the study. She doesn't leave until I say so. She doesn't make calls. She doesn't speak to anyone. Is that clear? Hana's eyes went wide, the full weight of her situation finally landing. Jaewon, don't do this. I'm your wife. I'm the mother of your child. I did this because I love you. Don't you see that? Everything I've ever done has been for you. For us, for this family. Jaewon turned away from her. He knelt beside Sumin, carefully, gently, like she was something precious that might break. He helped her to her feet, one arm around her waist, taking most of her weight. I've got you, he said quietly, his voice soft, in a way his men had never heard. You're safe now, I promise. He didn't watch as they led Hana out, didn't flinch when her voice rose in the corridor, pleading, sobbing, insisting this was all a misunderstanding, that he was making a terrible mistake, that she'd done it all for him. He just held Sumin steady and tried to breathe. Dr. Yoon arrived within 20 minutes, a leather medical bag in hand, his face carefully composed. He'd been the Park family physician for over 2 decades. He'd treated gunshot wounds, knife injuries, and things far worse without asking questions. That was why they trusted him. The wound on Sumin's arm wasn't deep, but it needed stitches. She sat on the edge of her bed while the doctor worked, her face pale but composed, her eyes fixed on the far wall like she was trying to be somewhere else entirely. Jaewon stood by the door, watching. He couldn't make himself leave. Every time Sumin winced, at the sting of the antiseptic, the pull of the needle, something twisted in his chest, a feeling he couldn't quite name. When the doctor finished, he gave Sumin instructions for care and handed Jaewon a small bottle of painkillers. "She'll be fine physically," Dr. Yoon said quietly, low enough that only Jaewon could hear. The cut was superficial, a few millimeters deeper, and it would have hit the artery. But she's in shock. She needs rest, and he hesitated. She needs to feel safe. "Whatever happened here tonight, sir, she's terrified." Jaewon nodded. "Thank you. That will be all." After the doctor left, after the room settled into silence, Sumin finally looked at him. Her eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted, but there was something else there too, a question she seemed afraid to ask. "You should go to your wife," she said softly. "Sir?" Jaewon didn't move. "Why would I do that?" "Because she's your wife. Because this family, your reputation, your organization, everything you've built, depends on maintaining order, on presenting a united front. You can't afford scandal. And what happened tonight, if people find out, my reputation means nothing if I can't protect the people in my own house." Sumin's eyes filled with tears. "I'm just the nanny, Mr. Park. I'm nobody. Your wife was right about that. I come from nothing. I have no family, no connections, no power. I'm not worth disrupting your entire life over." Jaewon crossed the room slowly, deliberately, and knelt in front of her so that his eyes were level with hers, so that she could see he meant every word. "You are not just anything," he said, "and you are not nobody. Do you understand me?" Sumin stared at him, tears spilling down her cheeks, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. The truth came out piece by piece over the following days. Jaewon's investigators were thorough. They had to be in his line of work. Information was currency. Secrets were weapons. And what they found about Hana over the next 72 hours shattered every illusion he'd ever held about his marriage. She'd married him for the name, for the power, for the protection that came with being the wife of a man no one in Seoul dared cross. Her family, the prestigious Kang family of Gangnam, had been drowning in debt when they met. Her father's gambling addiction had consumed their fortune. Failed investments had wiped out what remained. They owed money to people who didn't accept late payments. Dangerous people, people who broke bones and disappeared bodies. Marrying Jaewon had saved them, literally. Within weeks of the engagement, the debts were paid. The threats stopped. The Kang family could breathe again. But Hana had never loved him, not really. She'd performed love the way an actress performs a role, convincingly, beautifully, and completely without substance. Every smile, every kiss, every whispered "I love you" had been a transaction, a service rendered in exchange for safety. The investigators also found something else, something worse. Hana had been planning to leave. She'd been siphoning money into offshore accounts for months. Small amounts at first, then larger ones, building an escape route brick by brick, bank records in the Cayman Islands, property purchased in Vancouver under a shell company. A new identity, carefully constructed, waiting for her in a safe deposit box in Singapore. But there was a problem. Korean law didn't favor women in divorce proceedings when the husband was as powerful as Jaewon, especially not when that husband had connections to organizations that operated outside the law. She'd get nothing. No settlement, no alimony, no custody. She'd leave with less than she came with, and her family would be vulnerable again, unless she could prove he was unfit, unfaithful, scandalous. An affair with the nanny would have been perfect. Hana had been watching Sumin for weeks, studying her movements, noting how often Jaewon spoke to her, how his eyes seemed to soften when Yuna was in her arms. She photographed them together, recorded conversations, manufactured evidence of intimacy that didn't exist. But when she presented her proof to a lawyer, he'd shaken his head. "It's not enough. Anyone can see these are innocent interactions. You need something more concrete." So when she couldn't find proof of an affair that didn't exist, she decided to create a crisis instead. Injure the nanny, blame Jaewon, claim she'd caught them together and acted in a moment of justified passion. A wife defending her honor, her marriage, her family. The courts would sympathize. The media would eat it up. And Jaewon, desperate to avoid scandal, would give her whatever she wanted just to make it go away. It would have worked if Jaewon hadn't come home early. If that voice in his chest hadn't told him something is wrong. If fate, or God, or whatever force guided these things, hadn't intervened at the exact right moment. Quick reminder, if you're still with me, Smash that like button and make sure you're subscribed. We're just getting to the heart of this story. And trust me, you don't want to miss what comes next. Jae-won sat in his study. The file spread across his desk. Pages and pages of evidence laid bare in black and white. Bank statements showing the offshore transfers. Property records from Vancouver. Communications with lawyers, with accountants, with a private investigator she'd hired to build a case against him. And photographs, dozens of them, of Sumin and Jae-won, taken without their knowledge. Innocent moments twisted into something sordid through careful framing and suggestive captions. His lieutenant, Kang, stood by the door, his weathered face unreadable. "What do you want to do, sir?" Jae-won was quiet for a long moment. Outside the window, Seoul stretched beneath him, a city of 10 million people, of neon lights and ancient temples, of fortunes made and destroyed, a city his family had helped build, and sometimes torn apart. In his world, betrayal was met with consequences, swift, decisive, final. His father would have had Hana disappeared by now, her family too, as a message to anyone else who might consider crossing the park name. The old man had been ruthless in ways that Jae-won had never quite matched. But Jae-won wasn't his father. He'd spent his entire adult life trying not to be. "Draw up divorce papers," he said finally. "Full terms. She gets nothing. Not a single one. Her family's debts become her problem again. And she never sees Yuna. Not supervised visits, not holidays, not birthdays. Never. And if she fights it," Jae-won looked up, his eyes cold in a way that reminded Kang of the old boss. "She won't." He paused, then added, "Make sure the Kang family understands the situation. They protected her this long because they thought she was their meal ticket. Now they need to understand that protecting her means making an enemy of me. See how quickly their loyalty shifts." Kang nodded. "It will be done." Hana was escorted from the house the next morning. She screamed, cried, threatened. She invoked his name, his family's name, his organization's name. She promised retribution, exposure, scandal. She swore she had evidence that would destroy him, that powerful people would take her side, that he was making the biggest mistake of his life. None of it mattered. Jae-won watched from the second-floor window as the black sedan pulled away, taking with it 5 years of his life, 5 years of a marriage built on sand, 5 years of shared meals and empty conversations and a bed that had always felt slightly cold. Even when she was lying beside him, he felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no relief, just emptiness where she used to be. For 5 years he'd told himself that what they had was enough, that love wasn't necessary, respect was sufficient, partnership was practical, and his daughter needed a mother even if that mother didn't love her father. He'd been wrong about everything. The weeks that followed were the quietest Jae-won had known in years. He reduced his involvement in the organization, delegating more to his trusted lieutenants, stepping back from the day-to-day operations that had consumed him for so long. He attended fewer meetings, made fewer calls, let others handle the problems that used to keep him awake at night. Instead, he spent mornings with Yuna, feeding her breakfast, playing with her toys, listening to her babble about things only a 2-year-old could understand. He spent afternoons in the garden, reading books he'd never had time for. He spent evenings watching the sunset from the terrace, wondering how he'd let so much of his life slip away while he was busy building an empire. And Sumin stayed. She'd offered to leave a dozen times in those first weeks. "It's not appropriate," she said, her eyes fixed on the floor. "People will talk. Your associates, your business partners, the staff. They'll think something happened between us. They'll think your wife was right. Let them talk." "Mr. Park." "Jae-won." He said it quietly but firmly. "My name is Jae-won, and you've been calling me Sir and Mr. Park for 8 months. I think we're past that now." Sumin looked up at him, something unreadable in her eyes. "Your associates, your family. They'll think I'm protecting someone who protected my daughter every single day for 8 months. Someone who sang her to sleep when she had nightmares. Someone who held her when she was sick and I was too busy to come home. Someone who loved her like she was her own, even though she wasn't." He paused, searching for words he'd never been good at finding. Someone who never asked for anything in return. Someone who... He stopped himself. Sumin looked at him, her eyes searching his face for something. Someone who what? Jae-won was quiet for a long moment. The answer sat on his tongue, heavy and terrifying, but he couldn't say it. Not yet. It was too soon, too complicated. Too much. "Someone who makes this house feel like a home," he finally said, "for the first time since I can remember." The truth about Jae-won Park was this. He had never been loved. Not really. Not in the way that mattered. His mother had died when he was 4. Cancer. quick and merciless. He barely remembered her face, just fragments, the smell of her perfume, the sound of her voice singing him to sleep, a feeling of warmth that had vanished so completely he sometimes wondered if he'd imagined it. His father had been a hard man, forged by violence and necessity. He'd built the park organization from nothing, clawing his way up from the streets of Itaewon to the penthouse suites of Gangnam. He'd taught Jae-won everything he knew about power, how to acquire it, how to wield it, how to keep it. But he'd never taught him anything about love, never hugged him, never praised him, never told him he was proud. When Jae-won exceeded expectations, the old man simply raised them higher. When Jae-won made mistakes, he paid for them in bruises and silence. Love makes you weak, his father used to say. It gives your enemies a weapon to use against you. The moment someone knows what you care about, they know how to destroy you. Jae-won had believed that for most of his life, had lived by it, built his empire on it, chosen a wife based on it. Hana had been perfect on paper, beautiful, polished, connected. She didn't demand his heart, and he didn't offer it. It was a business arrangement dressed up in wedding vows, and he'd told himself that was enough. Then Yuna was born, and everything changed. The first time he held his daughter, this tiny, screaming, perfect creature, something cracked open inside him. A door he'd thought was sealed forever. He looked at her face, at her tiny fingers wrapped around his thumb, and he understood for the first time what his father had been so afraid of. This vulnerability, this willingness to die for someone, to kill for someone, to burn the whole world down, if it meant keeping them safe. His father had been right about one thing. Love was a weapon, but he'd been wrong about everything else. Love wasn't weakness. It was the only thing worth fighting for. Zumin's story was different, but the wounds were the same. She'd grown up in a small village in Jeolla province, the youngest of 4 children in a family that had nothing. Her father worked in the fields until his back gave out. Her mother took in laundry until her hands cracked and bled. They never complained, never asked for pity, never stopped working. Su-min was the smart one, the one who earned scholarships, the one who escaped. She went to Seoul for university, studied childhood education, dreamed of opening her own school someday, a place where children like her, poor children, forgotten children, could learn that their lives mattered. But dreams cost money, and money was something she'd never had. So she became a nanny instead, worked for wealthy families who paid her well and treated her like furniture. She learned to be invisible, to anticipate needs before they were spoken, to smile and nod and never, ever forget her place. The Park family was supposed to be just another job. She'd heard the rumors, of course. Everyone in Seoul had. The Park organization was legendary, feared, whispered about in the kinds of voices people used for ghosts and gods. Jae-won Park was said to be ruthless, cold, a man who'd inherited an empire of shadows and ruled it with an iron fist. But the man she met wasn't the monster from the stories. He was quiet, reserved, awkward with his own daughter in a way that made Su-min's heart ache. He didn't know how to play with Yuna, didn't know the songs she liked, didn't know that she couldn't sleep without her rabbit. He stood in doorways and watched, uncertain, like a stranger in his own home. And when he looked at Yuna, those rare moments when he let his guard down, Su-min saw something she recognized. Loneliness. Deep, profound, bone-crushing loneliness. The same loneliness she saw in her own mirror every night. It happened slowly, the way dawn happens. Not all at once, but in gradual degrees of light. Not with grand gestures or dramatic confessions, but with small moments that accumulated like snow. Quiet and steady, until suddenly the landscape had changed completely, and neither of them could remember what it looked like before. Su-min reading to Yuna, while Jae-won watched from the doorway, his expression soft in a way she'd never seen. Dinners together after Yuna fell asleep, talking about everything and nothing. Her childhood in Jeolla, his years studying abroad, the books they'd read, and the places they dreamed of visiting. The way her hand brushed his when she handed him his morning coffee. The way he found himself looking for her whenever he entered a room. The way she laughed at his terrible jokes. And the way that laugh made him feel like maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as broken as he'd always believed. 3 months after Hana left, on an evening painted gold by the setting sun, Jae-won found Su-min in the garden. She was sitting on the bench beneath the cherry tree, the one his mother had planted 40 years ago, the one that bloomed every spring in explosions of pink and white. Her face was tilted toward the fading light, her eyes closed, her expression peaceful in a way he rarely saw. She looked, he thought, like something from a painting, something beautiful and fragile and infinitely precious. He sat beside her without speaking. They stayed like that for a long time, not touching, barely breathing, watching the sky shift through shades of pink and gold and deep, bruised violet. The city hummed in the distance, traffic and voices and the endless pulse of 10 million lives. But here, in this garden, in this moment, none of it existed. "I should tell you something," Jae-won finally said, his voice low. Sumin turned to look at him. Her eyes were soft, questioning, waiting. Hana was right about one thing. "What?" "The way I look at you." He met her eyes, steady and unguarded in a way he'd never allowed himself to be. "It's not the way a man looks at his daughter's nanny. It hasn't been for a long time." Sumin's breath caught. "Jae-won, I know what I am." The words came faster now, tumbling out like they'd been dammed up for months. "I know the life I live, the things I've done, the danger that follows me everywhere. I know I have no right to ask you to be part of that, to tie yourself to a man with blood on his hands and enemies around every corner. Then don't ask." He blinked. "What?" Su-min reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were warm, steady, certain. "Don't ask me to be part of your world," she said softly. "That's not what I want. Ask me to be part of your life. Ask me to be there when you come home at night, to share meals with you and Yuna, to grow old together watching that cherry tree bloom. There's a difference." Jae-won stared at her. This woman who had seen the violence of his family and stayed anyway, who had loved his daughter without condition or expectation, who had never asked him for money or power or status, only for his presence, his attention, his time, who had given him something he'd never had. The feeling of being enough, exactly as he was. "I'm asking," he said. Su-min smiled, tears sliding down her cheeks. "Then I'm staying." The wedding was small, private, held in the garden beneath the cherry tree where they'd first spoken the truth. There were no photographers, no celebrity guests, no coverage in the society pages, just a handful of people who mattered. Jae-won's most trusted lieutenants, Su-min's elderly parents who'd traveled from Jeolla for the first time in decades, and Yuna, who served as flower girl with 3-year-old enthusiasm, scattering petals everywhere and laughing every time the wind caught them wrong. The ceremony was traditional, honoring both their families, blending old customs with new promises. Su-min wore a hanbok that had belonged to Jae-won's mother, pale pink silk embroidered with cranes, preserved for 40 years in the hope that someday it would be worn again. When the officiant asked if there were any objections, one of the lieutenants made a joke about Hana bursting through the gates, and everyone laughed, even Jae-won, which surprised everyone who knew him. And when Jae-won lifted Su-min's veil and saw her face, radiant, real, entirely hers, he understood what Hana had never grasped. True love doesn't need to be performed. It doesn't need contracts or calculations or exit strategies. It doesn't ask what you can provide or what you're worth on paper. It just is. That night after Yuna was asleep and the guests had gone, Jae-won and Su-min stood on the terrace of the park estate. The city lights of Seoul glittered below them like scattered diamonds, and somewhere in the distance, a temple bell rang midnight. "You saved my life," Su-min said quietly. "That night with Hana, you saved me. You saved mine first," Jae-won replied. "Every day for 8 months without even knowing it." She leaned her head against his shoulder, and he wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. "What happens now?" she asked. Jae-won looked out at the city, the empire his family had built, the legacy he'd inherited, the world of shadows and silence that had been his entire existence. For the first time, it felt small, manageable, like something he could shape rather than something that shaped him. "Now," he said, "we live." The months that followed were the happiest of Jae-won's life. He continued to step back from the organization, transitioning leadership to a council of trusted lieutenants. The park name still commanded respect, still opened doors, still protected the family from those who might wish them harm. But Jae-won was no longer at the center of it all. He was instead at the center of something smaller and infinitely more valuable. Morning coffee with Su-min while Yuna ate breakfast, chattering about her dreams. Afternoons at the park, pushing his daughter on swings, teaching her to feed the ducks in the pond. Evenings on the terrace, watching the sunset with his wife, talking about everything and nothing. He learned things about himself that he'd never known, that he liked to cook, badly but with enthusiasm, that he had a talent for gardening, inherited from the mother he barely remembered, that he could make Yuna laugh by making ridiculous faces, and that her laugh was the most beautiful sound in the world. Su-min taught him other things, how to be gentle with himself, to forgive his own mistakes, to believe that he deserved happiness, even after everything he'd done. She held him on the nights when the past came back, the violence, the choices, the faces of men who'd crossed him and paid the price, and she never asked him to be anyone other than who he was. "You're not your father," she told him one night, when the memories were particularly heavy. "You're not the organization. You're Jae-won. A man who loves his daughter. A man who chose kindness when he could have chosen cruelty. A man who's trying to be better every single day. How do you know? He asked. Because I see you, she said simply. I've always seen you. Hannah's story ended the way stories like hers always do. The divorce was finalized within 4 months. Her lawyers tried every trick they could think of. Accusations of abuse, claims of hidden assets, threats of media exposure, but none of it mattered. The Park family's resources were vast, their connections deeper, their patience infinite. In the end, Hannah got nothing. Not a single one. Her family's debts, which had been covered for 5 years by Jaewon's protection, came due all at once. The creditors who'd been held at bay suddenly remembered what they were owed, and they weren't inclined toward mercy. The Kang family lost everything: their Gangnam apartment, their vacation home in Jeju, their membership at the country club. They scattered. Her father fleeing to avoid loan sharks, her mother moving in with distant relatives, her brother cutting all ties and changing his name. Hannah herself disappeared. Some said she'd gone to China. Others said Europe. There were rumors of her working as a hostess in Singapore, using whatever remained of her beauty to survive. She tried once to contact Jaewon. A letter sent through her former lawyer, asking for forgiveness, asking for another chance, promising she'd changed, that she understood now what really mattered, that she could be the wife he deserved if he'd just give her one more opportunity. Jaewon never read it. Some doors, once closed, stay closed forever. Years passed. Good years. Full years. Yoona grew from a toddler to a child to a young woman, inheriting her father's sharp mind and her mother's gentle heart. She called Sumin Uma without hesitation, without confusion, without ever needing to be told that blood didn't define family. When she was old enough to ask about her birth mother, really ask, not just the simple questions of childhood, Jaewon and Sumin told her the truth. Gently, carefully, with love. She made choices, Sumin explained, that hurt people, including herself. And sometimes when people hurt us, the kindest thing we can do is let them go and wish them well from a distance. Yoona thought about this for a long moment. She was 15 then, sharp-eyed and thoughtful, already showing signs of the woman she would become. Do you hate her? She asked her father, for what she tried to do. Jaewon considered the question seriously. No, he finally said. I feel sad for her. Sad that she was so broken she thought violence was her only option. Sad that desperation twisted her into someone capable of hurting an innocent person. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. But sadness isn't the same as allowing someone back into your life. Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending the hurt didn't happen, or giving someone another chance to hurt you again. It means letting go of the anger so it doesn't poison you. It means wishing them well and moving forward. Yoona nodded slowly. Then she looked at Sumin and asked, But you're my real mom, right? Sumin's eyes filled with tears. I've been your mom since the first day I held you, she said, and I'll be your mom until the last day I draw breath. Yoona smiled and went back to her homework like it was the simplest thing in the world, and maybe it was. On an evening many years later, Jaewon and Sumin sat in the garden beneath the cherry tree. They were older now, gray in their hair, lines on their faces, the accumulated wear of lives fully lived. Yoona had grown and gone, off to university, then to her own career, then to a family of her own. The house felt emptier without her, but not lonely, never lonely. The cherry tree was in full bloom, the way it was every spring, pink petals drifting down like snow. Jaewon reached over and took Sumin's hand, the way he had 10,000 times before. Do you ever think about that night? Sumin asked. The night everything changed. Sometimes, Jaewon admitted. I think about how close I came to losing everything. If I'd stayed in that meeting 5 more minutes. If I hadn't listened to that voice telling me to come home. What do you think that voice was? Jaewon was quiet for a moment. He'd thought about this many times over the years, turning it over in his mind like a stone. I don't know, he finally said. My mother, maybe. Or God. Or just something in the universe that wanted us to find each other. He squeezed her hand. Does it matter? No, Sumin said, leaning her head against his shoulder. I suppose it doesn't. They sat together as the sun set, as the petals fell, as the city hummed in the distance. 2 people who had found each other against all odds, who had built something beautiful from the wreckage of betrayal and pain. I love you, Jaewon said. The words came easily now. After so many years, they'd lost their terror and kept their truth. I love you too, Sumin replied. Always have, always will. The park organization continued under new leadership, quieter now, more legitimate, slowly transitioning from the shadows into the light. It was what Jaewon had always wanted. what his father had never allowed, a legacy that his grandchildren could inherit without shame. Yuna sometimes asked about the family business, the history, the stories she'd heard whispered at school. Jae-won told her the truth, not all of it, not the worst of it, but enough. Enough to understand where she came from, enough to know that redemption was possible, that people could change, that the sins of the father didn't have to become the sins of the child. Your grandfather built something powerful, he told her once when she was 17 and asking hard questions. But power without purpose is just violence wearing a suit. I've spent my whole life trying to give our family's power a purpose, to protect people instead of preying on them, to build instead of destroy. Did you succeed? Yuna asked. Jae-won looked at her, this brilliant, compassionate young woman who was the best of both him and Soo-min, who volunteered at shelters and studied international law and dreamed of making the world better. You tell me, he said. Yuna smiled, and that smile, so like her mother's, so full of warmth and hope, told him everything he needed to know. The night before Yuna's wedding, Jae-won couldn't sleep. He found himself in the garden again, beneath the cherry tree, staring up at a sky full of stars. So much had changed since that night almost 20 years ago. He was different, the world was different, but some things remained constant. The scent of cherry blossoms, the hum of the city, the feeling that life was precious and fleeting and worthy of protection. Soo-min found him there, the way she always did. She sat beside him without speaking, and they held hands like teenagers, like newlyweds, like two people who had somehow stumbled into a love story neither of them expected. Nervous? She asked. Terrified, he admitted. I'm giving her away tomorrow, my little girl. You're not giving her away. You're welcoming someone new into our family. There's a difference. Jae-won smiled despite himself. You always know the right thing to say. 20 years of practice. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night. Then Jae-won spoke again, his voice thoughtful. I've been thinking about Hana lately. Soo-min didn't tense or pull away. After all these years, the name held no power. Oh, I heard she passed away 6 months ago. Cancer, apparently. Alone in some hospital in Malaysia. I'm sorry. Are you? Soo-min considered the question. I'm sorry for the life she could have had if she'd made different choices. I'm sorry she never found what she was looking for, but I can't mourn someone who tried to kill me. That's fair. Do you feel anything about her death? Jae-won thought about it for a long moment. Relief maybe, that it's truly over, that she can't hurt us anymore, can't try to come back, can't cast any more shadows. He paused. And sadness, not for her exactly, but for the waste of it all. She had everything, beauty, intelligence, opportunities most people only dream of, and she threw it all away chasing something that was never going to make her happy. What was that? Enough, Jae-won said. She was always chasing enough money, enough status, enough security. But she never understood that enough isn't something you find outside yourself. It's something you decide. You wake up one day and you look at your life and you say, this is enough. This person, this moment, this breath, enough. Soo-min squeezed his hand. When did you figure that out? The night I found you bleeding on the floor and realized I'd rather lose everything than lose you. He turned to look at her. You were enough. You've always been enough. And every day I've had with you has been more than I ever deserved. Soo-min's eyes glistened. 20 years and you still managed to make me cry. Hopefully happy tears. Always. Yuna's wedding was everything the Park family wedding hadn't been. Grand, public, covered by every media outlet in Korea. She'd chosen a good man, a prosecutor who'd made his name fighting corruption, who looked at her like she hung the moon and stars. Jae-won walked his daughter down the aisle of the cathedral, his steps steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. Soo-min sat in the front row, radiant in blue silk, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. At the altar, Jae-won placed Yuna's hand in her fiancé's and leaned close to whisper something only the three of them could hear. Take care of her. She's the best thing I ever did. The young man nodded, his eyes serious. I will, sir. I promise. Jae-won took his seat beside Soo-min, and she immediately reached for his hand. They watched together as their daughter spoke her vows, as rings were exchanged, as the officiant pronounced them husband and wife. And when Yuna turned to find her parents in the crowd, her smile brighter than any diamond, Jae-won felt something settle in his chest. Peace, real peace, the kind that comes from knowing you've done your best, loved your hardest, given everything you had, the kind that comes from a life well lived. If this story touched something in you, if it reminded you that love doesn't always come from where we expect, that second chances are real, that sometimes the people who save us are the ones we almost overlooked, please like, share this with someone who needs it, and subscribe to Solely Soul Stories. Tell me in the comments, what lesson are you taking from Jae-won's journey? Because maybe this story found you for a reason. In the golden light of that evening, Husband and wife sat together, knowing that even in the darkest moments, there's always a path forward. You just have to choose it, and choose the people who choose you back every single day.